Hello everybody and welcome back to LMM. Today we're in Birmingham for the National Festival of Railway Modelling, and as part of this we've bought our modular layout. At this show there are no less than 60 layouts, so today join us for 60 layouts in 60 minutes. Begin!
We'll start off with the layout that I'm stood next door to and the club that I'm part of. This is the Nearly Competent Modellers Association's Modular, and at this show it is the largest that it has ever been, with trains covering some 60 foot from end to end. The layout is set in present day as a heritage railway, which basically means we can run whatever we want with whatever we want, meaning there is a wide variety of eclectic rolling stock being used, like this almost 50-year-old J50 pulling brand new Ellis Clark coaches, and every time that went past it just made me happy. You also get to see a wide variety of locomotives and trains that have appeared on the channel, making their way up and down. The big new thing for this year was our passing loop, allowing trains to pass each other without having to stop, and featuring working signals that are interlocked with our points. This means that operation can be a lot more slick and keep things moving for people to enjoy. And we did get a bit silly occasionally and get to run some stuff which you don't normally get to see on the exhibition circuit. Next door to us and staying in Double O was a concept for a layout that I have never seen done before. This was the classic novels of Agatha Christie, and it was full of scenes taken directly from the pages of the books. It was a pretty impressive layout in its own right, featuring a station with 4 roads and a double-track main line with constant trains running up and down. But there were so many little treasures to see, taking you straight into the world of Agatha Christie. Little station signs and scenes you go, oh, I know that from the book or TV adaptations. And my absolute favourite feature was this paddle steamer that made its way up and down the River Nile. There was frankly too much to take in, but I really loved the concept, making a layout that appeals to more than just model railway enthusiasts. And then it was time for something entirely different with this layout in HOM, of which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce its name because I'll just butcher it. But it's set in a fictitious location somewhere in the southwest of the Swiss Alps. And what's particularly cool about this one is it started off as a 2-metre long diorama in order to develop scenic skills, particularly around snow. And since then it's kind of got out of hand and expanded and become a layout in its own right. I always love seeing layouts based on railways on the continent because I'm not so familiar with them, so it's great to see how different places went about answering the question of the railway, different designs of infrastructure, locomotives, rolling stock and all sorts, and I particularly love seeing snow modelled. It's so hard to do right, and this one did it very well indeed. You feel cold just looking at it. It's so different and so brilliant. Dropping down to N-scale was Dawlish, Warton, modelled on the real location before the old station building was demolished. It incorporates many landmarks from the real location, including Langstone Rock, the sandstone glyphs and the distinctive footbridges. There's a real joy to watching full-length trains make their way up and down this picturesque location, set on a sunny day in the middle of summer, and it shows just what can be achieved in a small space with N-gauge. This really does feel like a mainline location, with a great variety of different rolling stock and different engines coming through. The thing that I really enjoyed was the fact that they were using a working timetable, letting the public see what was coming from what direction and what train it was. It was a next level of immersion and showed it wasn't just running trains, that this was trains running to a plan. And it means that for people who don't understand what things are, you know that the next train coming was, say, a milk train or was an express, and you could identify that. And I thought this was a really cool tool, and honestly I wish more model railways would do this. Jumping back up to Double O was Shepherd's Well EKR, the East Kent Railway, one of the Colonel Stevens light railways, and as a fan of all things light railway, this really appealed to me. I do love the whole ethos of a light railway. This is set about the time that the rest of the main lines in Kent were being electrified, and this is a last bastion for vintage steam and diesel locomotives still working on their revenue-earning services well into nationalisation. And it almost has a preservation feel to it, with a very eclectic mix of rolling stock. I love a yard where trains are brought in, marshalled and then made ready for their onward travel, and it was great to watch things moving about. And now time for something entirely different. This is a Rampage, a small sci-fi layout in 00, the main feature of which was this giant robot in the centre which responded to voice commands and could do a whole load of different actions. This made it really popular with the next generation who thought that was proper cool, and it shows that model railways have a much larger potential if we look at them in a different way, and whilst it's not for everybody, nobody can deny the fact that it was really popular. Returning to something based in the real world was Eastgate Harbor in 00, a fictional location somewhere in Kent set after the Second World War but before nationalisation had taken hold. This was a busy harbour with so much going on, including a vintage train making its way up and down at the very back of the layout. It was vast, and just the detail on the boats alone was absolutely superb. I've always been drawn to a harbour scene layout. The extra elevation, the water, it's always just such a visually interesting thing. Speaking of visuals, this one went above and beyond with lots of Easter eggs, like these guys having a fight. I thought that was super. And then in the cattle dock you had all the sheep, but they're made to move, so it looks like they're actually in there, they're not just static. That was absolutely brilliant. On an operational frontier, trains were coming in and being marshalled around in the various different sidings, and there was always something moving about to watch. I could have spent a lot longer watching this one. Moving up a scale to O-gauge was Barley End, set in the 1970s around a small rural halt, where the main traffic is barley being brought in and taken via road to the local mill. It featured sound-fitted locomotives for that extra ambiance as they moved around the layout, and it was great to see engines shunting back and forth off the shed on the layout for some extra operational interest. And whilst the baseboard is quite long, it goes to show what can be achieved in O with a relatively narrow baseboard. There's an awful lot that's been packed in here without it feeling cramped or overcrowded. Heading off to Northern Ireland was Donahadi railway station in 00, although technically this is the wrong scale because normally 00 represents the standard gauge, which is 4 for 8.5, whereas the Irish standard gauge, which is being modelled here, is 5 foot 3, so technically this is the wrong scale, although recently there have been a load of new things announced in ready to run for Irish railways in 00, so that's something exciting, and we'll just gloss over the fact it's slightly wrong. This was a stunningly pretty layout, and I mentioned earlier how much I love layouts that have a harbour on them, and this one had a particularly impressive lighthouse on it as well. It represents how Donahadi town and railway would have been before the line was closed in 1950. There's a wide variety of rolling stock trundling up and down, which is all subtly different to the stuff that we got over here in England. Returning to the main line and dropping down a scale to TT was Exebridge, set somewhere in the 1960s during the steam and diesel changeover. As you may well know, I am a big fan of the old TT style. I think it's got a real lovely charm to it, and it's so good to see it modelled here in proper fine scale. It shows that even before Hornby brought it back, this was a scale that could achieve so much in its own right. This represented a fairly busy branch with trains passing regularly and a good variety of rolling stock making its way across the layout. I particularly liked the viaduct crossing the creek and the way that the countryside just takes me straight back to the West Country. Jumping back up a scale to O-gauge was Strood Dock, a southern terminus, which is part fact, part fiction, and based loosely on the original South Eastern Railway's North Kent line to Strood. As I've mentioned previously in this video, I love a dockside scene, and this was super, particularly the Clyde Puffer that has real working smoke, as to all of the locomotives. They're all fitted with sound and smoke, and the one that I really enjoyed was this one, which I'm pretty sure started life as one of the Lima 4Fs, which has been extensively upgraded to make it a show-worthy loco. As you'd expect for a dockside layout, there was plenty of shunting going on, interspersed with the odd passenger train, as locomotives bring their service in, head off to the shed to be serviced, before collecting them and working their way back to whence they came. And from smoke and sound-fitted engines to the real thing in 00 on the Hornby live steam roadshow layout. Every time I see these things, I'm absolutely awestruck. Real scale working steam engines in 00. They're absolutely fabulous. I love hearing them as they go past, and they truly are little mechanical marvels. Staying with live steam but moving up to the mighty Gauge 1 was the Ridings, the Gauge 1 Model Railway Association show layout, and this was absolutely spectacular. Seeing large, real working steam engines thundering around with full-length appropriate trains was an absolute joy to behold. The sights, the sounds and the smells was absolutely intoxicating. And you really have to marvel at the amount of time and effort and knowledge that's gone into building this miniature mainline. These are proper thoroughbred mainline locomotives, and they are an absolute joy. They are proper mechanical marvels, and I love seeing them go past. And I expect that the owners of the engines also enjoy bringing them to a show like this, where they get the opportunity to set up a big layout and let their engines actually go and have a half-decent run. I could have spent hours here watching the different locomotives charge around the track. There's a real joy and sense of satisfaction from watching these machines work. Returning to the world of electric trains and dropping back down to 00 was Alton TMD, which is Tractive and Maintenance Depot. It is set in a fictitious location somewhere in the Midlands, using locos and rolling stock that typically ran from the early 90s up until 1997, the change of a period from British rail sectorisation to privatisation. And I think this is a cracking layout. There's always something moving about, and there's always something to watch. There are regular trains of TTA and TEA tank wagons being brought in, marshalled. There's the cement works, there are passenger workings over to the platform. It's just an absolute hive of activities. Plus, 37s are a common appearance on the layout, and who doesn't love a 37? The majority of the locomotives are also sound fitted for that extra ambiance, and it just brings something else to this layout. There is so much to watch and enjoy on this. Staying with depots and 00 was Deadman's Lane, based on a real location in Derby, although everything has been scaled down slightly and made a little bit more layout friendly. The idea behind it came when the owner, who had a large collection of Network Rail infrastructure vehicles, wanted them to take a centre stage in a layout rather than having one or two items appear on friends' layouts, and thus the idea was born to make this layout depicting an infrastructure depot. You'll see interesting trains like snow ploughs and Network Rail HSTs moving about, ready to undertake their vital role on today's railways. Moving away from 00 and modern day was Shadows of Exmoor in NG7, modelling part of the famous Linton and Barnstaple Railway with its instantly recognisable tank engines and rolling stock. I love the narrow gauge, and I particularly enjoy seeing it modelled in these larger scales. There was plenty to see, with trains arriving, being marshalled and then sent back along their way to the main line station at the other end. And I feel that this layout really captured the spirit of the original railway and the rolling hills of Exmoor. Jumping back up to the ever-popular 00 was Euxton Junction, which is a real place around 7 miles south of Preston, where the line to Manchester leaves the West Coast Main Line. At this point, the railway has got both fast and slow lines, and this layout recreates it faithfully. You've got 4 lines, 2 of which for the up direction and 2 of which for the down direction, but you'll have a pair for fast trains, like express passenger services, and a pair for slow trains, like freight and stopping passenger trains. This means it is a hive of activity, with trains running up and down the line and regularly passing each other. I always like a layout that's gone that extra level as well to have the overhead catenary modelled. It's such an important part of the electrified main line, but to actually go through all the hassle to have it actually modelled properly, I'm always genuinely impressed by that. And also a massive amount of respect for the fact that it makes maintaining a layout a pain in the backside, because it makes it harder to get your hand down there and actually clean the rails. The layout is set in 2005, which means there's a wide variety of stock, including the first Pendolinos, Voyagers and electric-hauled locomotive stock making their way up and down. Changing up to a more uncommon gauge was Warton Road in Gauge 3, something that's normally associated with garden railways and not layouts on the exhibition circuit. This represents a fictional branch line which was shut down by beaching, but has now been bought by a preservation society who have restored trains and now operate it as a preservation railway, with a little bit of southern influence in there, and operate regular services, including demonstration goods, as we can see going away here. It's really cool to see a gauge that I've not really got much experience with being demonstrated to what you can achieve, when normally I think of this gauge, I think of a railway that's charging around a garden, rather than something that's been fully scenic and built like this. It's genuinely very impressive and shows just the sheer scope of the model railway hobby. The idea is that most of the locomotives and stock are stored on the layout and moved around as needed, heading off to a fiddle yard when they need to disappear off scene. And also the track isn't powered. All of the locomotives are battery powered with radio control. As long as the model's got batteries and reception, it's going to keep on going, which stops all of those little electronic gremlins coming up with trying to get over points and things. And obviously it means that it's a lot easier to operate because you can walk alongside your model as you're going up and down with your controller. This is also a modular layout and can be built in different configurations depending on how much space is available at whatever exhibition it's going to. Staying with a theme of something slightly different was Sunshine from the Cotswold in Hornby 00, and as regular viewers of the channel will know, I absolutely adore pre-rail 00. There's something so wonderful about this, the way it clatters its way around the track. And I have a long-held ambition to do a layout in this very gauge. It's remarkable to think that when these locomotives were released, their full-size counterparts were still out working on the main line. These weren't models of heritage machines, no, these were models of things actually out and working. And it's got such a wonderful charm to it, and I was so excited to see this. Returning to the more traditional 2-rail 00 was fair to middling, which is actually 2 different layouts joined together. It's Everslike and Appin Colliery, which are part of the same fictional world. They can be exhibited on their own or together. The layout we're looking at the moment is actually Appin Colliery, which is somewhere between the fictional towns of Fair and Eckerslick. It's meant to be a deep underground mine, now controlled by the NCB following the nationalisation of the coal port, so trains get brought in and then are shunted by NCB liveried locomotives. With trains coming in regularly and having to be shunted around and sorted ready for reloading and taken out, there was always something moving on this layout. With the scale staying the same but the distance between the rails changing was the Milthorp Light Railway in 009, and I am a huge fan of the narrow gauge and love seeing it modelled because there is just so much potential, it's almost limitless. This is a fictional railway set somewhere in the Peak District in modern day, and it operates as a preserved railway, which is great because it means you can run basically whatever you want with whatever you want, and the modeller's licence is massive. You like that model? That's great. You're going to run that. And it means you can put out wonderfully eclectic mixes of rolling stock just because you like it and it makes sense to you. For an entirely different kind of modelling was Brick Coast Main Line, a Lego layout. Now this was here last year and it is just as impressive this year with this massive great bridge spanning the centre. I love the fact that people can take the humble Lego brick and turn it into trains that I recognise, because most of these aren't sets, they're not something you can go to the shop and just get. Somebody's had to look at Lego and go, "Ooh, you know what? I can make this out of it," and I think that is genuinely impressive. That's a real kind of modelling, and it shows how big the model railway sector is, because this you wouldn't normally consider as part of it, but it is modelling in its own right. These are really well done models, and having something of this scale charging around was super. And it also just shows how versatile Lego is and just what you can do with it. There was a absolutely massive amount of different rolling stock and locomotives making their way around the layout, all constructed from standard Lego, and that, I mean, just look what can be created if you put your mind to it in Lego. Returning to modern day and 00 was Stern Point. This is a fictional heritage railway that operates out on a peninsula, which means there's a wide variety of eclectic rolling stock, like this break van train being operated by no less than 3 Ruston 48s going up and down. It seeks to recreate a heritage railway in its early days, making its way out across the sands. And I love this concept because it's something you don't really ever get to see modelled. In fact, I can't ever think of another layout that I've seen, A, that really does sand to this degree, or models a layout out on a peninsula going out towards the sea. It kind of gives Fairborn vibes if the Fairborn had been a standard gauge railway. And again, being a heritage railway means you can run whatever you want with whatever you want, as long as it has that nice heritage vibe to it. And this is a great concept. It puts a new spin on the there and back theme of a model railway, and has a massive lighthouse as well, which is kind of cool. Staying with 00 was a real phoenix of a layout. I'm sure a lot of you remember that back in 2019 the Market Deeping Model Railway exhibition was hit with a load of senseless vandalism, and they had all of their stuff destroyed. The model railway community responded with an outcry of donations to help support the guys who had lost basically everything, and this is Mitchell Junction, the first layout to be built with those donations. And they've done something really smart with this, because it's a layout that's designed to be used and operated by people going to an exhibition, to allow people to get hands-on with a proper model railway. It's set in a fictional location in modern day and features 2 mainline loops, a small shunting yard, and most excitingly, a little narrow gauge railway in the centre as well. And I love the way that this brings 2 worlds together, your modern mainline and your heritage steam-hauled narrow gauge alongside it, which gives it kind of a little bit of a Festiniog railway vibes. I absolutely love the fact that this has been built to bring people into the hobby, to get them involved and get them driving an exhibition layout. Who knows what fires will be lit beneath those people having got a taste of operating a model railway. Perhaps they'll go on and build their own, or join a club and be part of something. It's brilliant to see this. So often layouts are behind perspex or behind a fence, and this allowing people to get hands-on and involved is just, it's brilliant. Kudos to you guys for making this happen. Jumping up several scales to 7¼ inch gauge was the There and Back Light Railway, offering rides to people who had come to the event. And on Sunday, Dave and I took over for an hour being drivers, which was super good fun. Even though it's just a short length of track, offering rides to the public was a real thrill, and that hour soon disappeared. We're not sure how many trips we went up and down, but it was almost every minute, and almost every train was full, which gives you some idea just how popular this little train was. And I can't imagine how many people are actually carried over the whole weekend. Heading back to the exhibitions, and heritage railways continue to be a popular theme amongst the layouts in attendance this year, with Lee Valley Railway Centre continuing the idea of a fictional preserved railway. And to this end, there was a wide variety of heritage stock running up and down. It's a really cool thing to see modelled, as I've said earlier in the video, allowing users to be able to run what they want with what they want. If you've got a particular engine or something that you enjoy, it can come along and be parked. It doesn't really matter if the region or era is different. They also ran some really fun things like this austerity pulling open wagons full of people, like was done in the early days of preservation.
Because it's going on a different line, the red is going out.
So if it went a different way, if it went towards that tunnel, then the signal would go green.
Yeah.
Returning to the world of 00 was Hardwick Grange, set somewhere between 1957 and 58, when steam engines were starting to be phased out and replaced by diesel locomotives. It's set somewhere in the Dukeries, a busy area in Nottinghamshire. What's particularly cool about this one is the points and signals are all operated from brass lever frames with linen and twine and return springs. Apparently, tying the knots in the twine needed a very steady hand and the use of tweezers. As with several other layouts that we've looked at during this video, all train movements are guided by detailed schedules, with multiple operating positions with colour-coded instructions. And this means that there are precise trains formations as well as the correct headlamp codes in place. Rather than working in real time, the timetable is set to a digital clock that moves on with each step of the instructions. The arrivals and departures are heralded by authentic bell codes exchanged between the station and the fiddle yard, which represent the block working of the era, and that is proper cool. It's that next level of immersion going there. Staying with 00 but jumping forward to the 1980s was Kelvin Grove, modelling London and its 3-rail system, including part of the famous London Underground. Yes, this had tube working, which worked not only on the surface of the layout, but underground as well, featuring a station done up in the famous Art Deco style that's so synonymous with the Underground. With about 50% of the layout underground, a camera system is employed to allow the operators to see what's going on with the trains in operation, and that's proper cool. Of course, it's an underground station, so you can't see what's going on, so putting cameras and monitors in so everybody can see what's going on is a pretty smart move, and also makes it feel more authentic, like you're watching it from a CCTV monitor or something. I just really like that. That was a really cool feature.
The whiteboard on the stop table.
Heading back overground again was Rushy Wharf in 00, and I've said it many times in this video before and I'll say it again, I love a dockside scene or a wharf. There's something about having water, that extra sense of elevation, it's just amazing. The thing I really liked about this was it showed how much can be achieved with something comparatively simple. There's not a whole lot to this layout. You've got your water in the foreground, a couple of points so things can be marshed around and shunted, and then that massive great warehouse in the background that dominates the fictional skyline. It shows that you don't need to overcrowd or overthink a layout to have something that's visually impressive. This takes me straight back to the scenes I've seen in books of locomotives coming in and shunting wagons, and it all looks just so wonderfully simple.
Can I have one of them and a pen?
And staying with 00 was Wiveliscombe, a well-known layout that's attended well over 80 shows and events, which is pretty impressive. It represents the station of its name on the Devon and Somerset Railway, set in the 1950s under the British Railway rule of the ex-Great Western Branch Line. What I really liked about this layout was some of the information that I learnt about the real location before it was closed in 1966. There were 4 goods trains a day going in each direction, but they were limited to 28 wagons, and there were 7 up and 7 down trains going up and down every weekday, but there were 13 up and down on a Saturday. This one really did sum up all of the beauty of that stereotypical Great Western Branch Line, and I loved it. Jumping forward in time to modern day and down a scale to N-gauge was Newcastle by the Water, comprised of a 4-track main line which has dedicated passenger and freight lines. There's a large station in the middle which is a junction for a single branch line. I love a layout like this which is designed to be as entertaining as possible. There is always something moving about on it, and frequently you can stand there and watch a train followed by another train, past another train, past another. This is the kind of thing that I live for on the exhibition circuit. It's just entertainment and trains are running past and you never ever get bored. It's just constant action and I think it's absolutely brilliant. Even though the modern day isn't my period of choice to model, it's still fascinating to watch so many things going back and forth. And as ever with N-gauge, it shows just what you can achieve with it. Full-length trains running at scale, full speeds on a main line in such a tiny space. It's an absolute joy. And staying with the theme of a 4-track main line but jumping back up to 00 was Sharnbrook Summit, based on a real location on the Midland main line, complete with 2 fast and 2 slow lines. This was a hive of activity, with trains regularly passing and overtaking each other, which was a real joy to watch. You never got the opportunity to be bored because there was always a train running up or down. It's set in the crossover period between steam and diesel, with first-generation DMUs making their way up and down, but still with steam-hauled expresses charging up and down the line. It was a great mix of traction and brilliant to see such an action-packed layout. Staying with a busy main line but dropping down to N scale was Lacy Dale. Inspired by the limestone valleys of the Derbyshire Peak District, this portrays a section of the old main line between London and Manchester via Derby. The real railway would crisscross over the River Wye with several viaducts, and the layout represents it with this impressive structure in the middle. There's also been a fictitious local branch line added to the valley floor, running underneath a viaduct for extra operational interest, which runs to a local station and goods yard, which provide a link through the hills to a local town. As with the previous couple of layouts, this was also a hive of activity, with trains constantly running up and down and passing each other, which made it hugely entertaining to watch. And I'm also a huge fan of something like this that has such a massive elevation. It makes you feel like the railway is really a part of the landscape and makes the whole scene so much more visually interesting. And then it was time for something entirely different as we return to modern day but head off to Japan for Ishinoka in N-gauge. The layout depicts a terminus station in a large town in Japan that has seen an increase in tourism. It features a main line, a branch line and a tramway which links the station to a samurai heritage site. As I've said several times before, I love seeing layouts that depict other parts of the world, particularly those that I've never been to. I love the different design of rolling stock, the different design of architecture, and just how everything is so different, but we still get excited because it's trains running. Returning to Blighty and O-gauge was Ullapool, set in the mid-1980s, imagining what might have been if the proposed Garve to Ullapool railway had been completed and been extended on to Lochinver. Being in the mid-1980s, the layout is full of BR Blue diesels, the majority of which are fitted with sound for that extra ambiance as they make their way up and down the layout, working a variety of different trains. The scenery is deliberately simple but atmospheric, with muted tones and rocky ground and bursts of yellow gorse suggesting that it's in the Highlands. It's another great example of what can be achieved with O-gauge in a relatively restricted space. That baseboard isn't very wide at all, but there's an awful lot going on. Dropping down a scale to HO and heading off to Austria was this layout that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name of, set somewhere in the pre-Alpine area. It's a mainline station that has a narrow gauge terminus attached to it, the idea being that this once served a local mine, but in today's modern world it's now a heritage railway taking tourists up to the old site. The station itself isn't heavily used apart from on weekends bringing aforementioned tourists in. The rest of the time it's a through route for other trains to go through. I've mentioned it before, but I'm always amazed when I see a catenary fully modelled. The amount of time and effort that goes into stringing all of that together is absolutely amazing, and the fact that it will get in the way when anything goes wrong or you need to clean the track or put something back on, it's an absolutely incredible thing to do. And I know I've said it many times before in this video, but I love seeing the continent modelled. It's like going on holiday without actually having to leave. Returning to the UK and heading to a very cold and snowy Wales was Ring Quarries in 10mm to the foot gauge, which I think is the same scale as gauge 1 but modelling the narrow gauge. This rather wonderfully captured the atmosphere of how grim it would have been to be working on the faces during the cold and harsh Welsh winters. And as much as I love narrow gauge, I looked at this and went, I'm glad I'm not there. It must have been utterly grim. I mentioned previously how hard snow is to do properly in modelling, and this layout has absolutely nailed it. It's a fantastic thing to look upon. Moving away from Wales and dropping down to N-gauge was Smalldale Quarry. Set in the 1970s to the 1980s, it's based on a real location, which is somewhere between Buxton and Chapel-le Firth. The quarry was once part of the ICI Buxton Lime operations, but the layout is not based on the actual quarry, but a depiction of what the surrounding railway could have looked like in the 70s and 80s, making it the stomping ground of BR Blue diesels making their way back and forth with a variety of trains. There's plenty to see as well, with trains marshalling themselves through the quarry and other various industries across the line, which meant there was plenty of interesting operation and shunting. For instance, empty stone trains would come into the head shunt by the bottling plant, the loco would uncouple, an industrial loco would then come in and pick up the empty wagons and take them into the quarry building for loading. It meant there was always something moving around and made it quite exciting to watch. Staying with N-gauge but heading across the Atlantic to the US of A was Nazareth Portland Cement. Based on the cement manufacturing industry of northeast Pennsylvania, this was absolutely superb. Massive great American trains wound their way across the layout, and it was a proper hive of activity. As soon as one train had made its way halfway across, another would come the other way. I really love the way the Americans have done railroads. It's so different to what we used to in the UK, just the sheer scale of it, on the sheer length of it, and being able to run a train of this length in miniature, in N scale, never ceases to amaze me. The fact that it all just works is brilliant, and the amount of power in one of those units to be able to pull all of these wagons is just sublime. This was an absolute hive of activity. It wasn't just stuff moving about on the main line with their ridiculously long trains, there was stuff being shunted around elsewhere on the layout, and it was just an absolute pleasure to watch, and I really wish I'd had more time just to enjoy, this one and imagine myself being stateside. The layout felt wonderfully industrial and grubby, with all of the stock being weathered to fit in with its environment. And as I've said before, I love how different all of this is to the stuff that we normally got in the UK.
You busy? You got all afternoon. You can do that. You're picking it up at 10 o'clock.
Returning to the UK and heading back in time into the late 1930s was Andrew's Yard in O-gauge, where Great Western Railway engines are collecting and dispatching wood and coal to yards nearby. The level of detail in this was absolutely sublime. There was so much to look at. Every square inch was a tiny scene worthy of your attention. As it's becoming increasingly popular, all the locomotives were sound fitted for that extra ambiance, and it was great to see locomotives in that beautiful Great Western green shunting wagons about across the layout. Halving the scale and getting back down to 00 and heading to Dorset was Wimborne, named after the station of which the layout models. And what's particularly cool about this one is that all of the points are hand built to fine scale standards to match the correct geometry for the location that they're positioned, meaning that this is a faithful representation of how the station would have been in the 1950s, and I think that is proper cool. I also like the fact that there are multiple methods of operation. They can operate the timetable from 1958, by which point the line was being lightly used, and this doesn't really make for a particularly exciting method of operation for a big exhibition. So they have another plan where they just run a lot of trains and keep things moving. There's constant shunting, trains running in and out, meaning it's perfect for an exhibition. And I absolutely love this. The amount of detail in it is absolutely superb. What's also particularly cool is that this layout was actually started way back in 1976, but as time went on, enthusiasm for it waned until a new group was formed in 2006 who managed to complete the vision from when the layout was started. Staying with 00 but moving to Oxfordshire is Kingsfield, a fictitious town some 15 miles west of Oxford. It's set between 1958 and 1965, meaning it's the last of British Railway steam and the start of the diesels in BR Green. What I like about this is it first appeared on the exhibition circuit in 2002 and since then has racked up well over 150 different shows, meaning it's one of those layouts that a lot of you have likely seen before. I love that they're running full-length trains like this 9F with its tanker wagons making its way gently across the layout. So long is the train that the locomotive has long disappeared and the wagons are still trundling past. There was just so much detail to look at across the length of the layout, and it wasn't just limited to mainline trains making their way up and down. There was a shed scene where locomotives were brought in, shunted and marshalled around and then put back on shed in a different order. All little things that keeps things moving, keeps people engaged and entertained, whilst the trains travelling up and down the main line make it to their destination. I mean, just the shed setup on its own would have been a standalone layout, but with everything else going on, this is brilliant. Heading off to Italy was the Italian Railway Society's layout in H O-gauge. It's set in a fictional location designed to showcase as much of the Italian railways as possible, so there's a wide variety of different rolling stock infrastructure and buildings displayed in the background. Multiple trains made their way shunting up and down, including this wonderful mobile buffer stop shunting locomotive, and there was a tramway at the back of the layout as well. I've said it many times already in this video, but I love seeing locomotives and infrastructure from different parts of the world. It's so interesting to see different designs of locomotives and rolling stock, and this just felt sunny. All of the colours and everything makes you feel like it's in the south of Italy, it's a hot summer's day, and really you want to be heading for the shade. Returning to the UK and dropping down to N-gauge was James Street, one of the biggest N-gauge exhibition layouts currently on the circle, and this was phenomenal. There was so much to look at. It really is N-gauge on a grand scale. It's set in the period between 1955 and 1965 and is located somewhere in the Midlands and mainly served by Midland and Eastern region trains. It consists of a large terminus, which is James Street, with 2 goods yards and a dockyard. This is coupled to a mid-level 2-track main line via Lidford Junction low-level station. Trains on the mid-level line use Lidford Junction station and then can run onto the high-level 4-track main line, which leads to Kendal station. That's what I love about this. There are multiple stations on this, so trains legitimately go and pause in a station before heading out and visiting another station. There's a branch line as well, which leads to Iona station, which can be used to reverse trains. What's particularly awesome about this is there is no fiddle yard. Viewing is available at all 4 sides around the layout, and trains are stabled prototypically in goods yards, in sidings, awaiting their next turn. It is absolutely phenomenal, and you can spend hours just watching stuff going, because there can be between 8 and 12 trains running at any one time. Returning to modern day and 00 was Venture Park, a fictional traction and rolling stock maintenance depot on the Midland Main Line. The real location is actually Scrubland, where the main line passes through in Kettering in Northamptonshire, and the layout gets its name from a business park that's located just off Junction 9 of the A14. The main features of the layout include a carriage and rolling stock servicing shed, smaller maintenance buildings for DMUs, as well as a wheel lay facility and fuel points. The layout is tailored to be set between the 2000s and 2010s, with HSTs being the main traffic, but the occasional steam engine working excursion can also be seen, as well as diesel locomotives making their way up and down the layout as they go for servicing.
When we set up
Heading back in time to the mainstay of BR Blue diesel locomotives, so between 1975 and 1987, was Tinker Lane in 00, a shunting yard set somewhere between Sheffield and Rotherham, full of locomotives making their way going back and forth. The locos were also all sound fitted as well for the extra ambience as they made their way across the layout, and this felt wonderfully grubby. This wasn't a preserved railway or a look back on the railways of yesterday with rose-tinted glasses. It all looked very much how the railway is. Just a bit messy. The modelling was absolutely superb, with loads of little details to keep your attention. And again, the layout was a good example of what could be achieved in a relatively narrow space. There was an awful lot going on here. Staying in roughly the same time period but jumping up to O-gauge was Blowers Green Wagon Repair Yard, based on a former wagon repair works in Birmingham, just a stone's throw from Dudley. The layout is set on a secondary mainline with crippled wagons being brought in to be repaired, and then wagons which have been fixed can be taken back out to the mainline to resume their duties. The idea behind this was to show that you can have a medium-sized own-gauge fine-scale layout and be more than just a simple shunting plank where trains come in, run round and then leave again. This has a load of operational potential. There is so much shunting that can be done of wagons being moved to various different points of the layout, and then there is just so much detail in here as well. It really feels like a wonderfully grubby yard back in the day, and it's quite an unusual thing to see modelled, and really a wonderful idea. Bring in rubbish wagons, park them somewhere, move other wagons, send them out. Heading back in time and going to EM gauge, which is a more correct version of 00, was Pencader, which was a station on the Great Western Line between Carmarthen and Aberystwyth. As there isn't anything ready to run in EM gauge, everything is either kit built or had to be modified for something that was originally O gauge, and all of the track that you can see is handmade, which really is going above and beyond. It's set in the 1930s, before the Great Western Manners were introduced, and runs a variety of trains which are suited to this period, and takes you right back to the golden age of the railways, where engines in that glorious Great Western green made their way across the West Country and Wales. Jumping forward in time to the early 2000s to HO gauge and across the continent to China was Beijing Ao, the only Chinese layout on the exhibition circuit at the moment, and it is certainly one of my favourite layouts that's currently doing the rounds. In fact, it's one of my favourite layouts of all time. It is always a hive of activity. It's an exhibition layout done to the best degree. There are train after train after train, banking and shunting operations, and in such a wide variety of different rolling stock locomotives, and of course such a different world to look at. I was lucky enough to visit China many years ago to see the railways, and every time I see this layout it takes me straight back to my own misadventures over there. This one is a real must to see, so if you ever go to a show and you know it's there, you must make a beeline to go just watch and appreciate this. It's full of exciting cameos and moving bits of the scenery, like a photographer who pops up to get a picture as the train goes past. It's absolutely brilliant. Returning back to Blighty and heading off to Wales was Splot in P4 gauge, which is the correct version of Double-O, with the rail spaced the exact right measurement for the scale of the rest of it. It's a fictional representation of a small shunting yard somewhere near Cardiff in the 1980s, and to that end features a wide variety of freight stock and locomotives that would have been seen in South Wales during this period. And because it's P4 gauge, all of the rolling stock has to be scratch built or heavily modified from existing ready to run stuff to make it appropriate. Being a freight transfer yard in a heavy industrial setting, everything has been weathered to some degree to make sure that it blends in. Heading back to the world of Double-O was Grantham in the Streamliner years, and this one is absolutely spectacular. It really does need to be seen to be believed. Most notably is the majority of the stock on it has been built especially for this layout, including the massive rake of pre-war wagons. The idea behind the layout was to take the viewer through a typical day at Grantham somewhere between 1935 and 1939, which meant you got things like the Flying Scotsman, streamliners going past, and a huge variety of different freight. For operation, what's really cool is every train out of the storage yard gets a new locomotive on it, even if it's travelling in the same direction, and some trains get completely remarshalled so that you feel like you're seeing different trains going past at a different point of the day. It's really clever, and what's really upsetting about this is one of its last showings as it's soon to be retired, and that seems like a terrible travesty.
That engine on the get it off.
Jumping down to the world of fine scale N gauge was the award-winning Richmond, named after the town of which the layout is based. It is stunningly beautiful, and admittedly when I was watching this back, there's so much detail that I actually forgot it was N gauge. Operation is relatively straightforward, with passenger trains running into the main station, dropping off their passengers and then returning, but there's a large goods yard where shunting takes place, and trains are fitted with automatic couplers that allow the shunting to take place, which is something that you don't often get to see in N gauge, and that's genuinely quite cool. Built by fellow YouTuber Chris of Peachy TT was Camelot in Hornby's new TT-120, showcasing some of the new developments in the brand, including sound-fitted locomotives and some items that weren't yet revealed to the general public, including the new Hornby B4, which is something I actually have also gone and got my hands on because it looks so cool. Jumping up the scales to O-gauge was Renwick, representing the fictional terminus of two branch lines way back in the pre-grouping days of between 1900 and 1908 on the North Eastern Railway. I love seeing the pre-grouping railways modelled because they're not something that we see very often. There's very little available ready to run, and when we think back to railways we think of the golden age from the 20s onwards, and this bit of history tends to get forgotten. Returning to the ever popular 00 was Whittles March, set between 1950 and 1960 on the outskirts of a large cement works, where trains are loaded with outgoing cement and incoming supplies are brought in via the rail. It connects directly to the main line, but is operated by the internal Blue Circle locomotives, and I really like the fact that the owner had gone that extra level to have his locomotives repainted to represent ones of the Blue Circle fleet. Particularly, I love the chevrons. I don't know what it is about wasp stripes, but wasp stripes make an industrial locomotive. The layout was originally set in a fictional location in East Anglia, taking its name from Whittlesea and March, but more recently, as the owner's tastes change and as an excuse to get some different rolling stock, he's changed it to be somewhere in the south. With the scale staying the same but the distance between the rails getting narrower was Lindbach in 009, built by my friend Ian Arkley, who wanted somewhere to run his Helgen Manning Wardle. And it really goes to show that you don't need to have a huge amount of space to make something that is absolutely stunning. Ian has made some amazing layouts in the past, but this time he's outdone himself. Returning to the standard gauge was Portis Head TMD, based on the Portis Head Railway if it had remained open and been developed into a modern DB/EWS and DRS depot. The layout boasts a 4-row engine shed with 2 central inspection pits. There's also a 4-bay refuelling station and fuel delivery area. The layout also features working yard lights, workshop lights and fully functioning signals. And I absolutely love something like this. Whilst I'm still not entirely sold on the idea of DCC fitted sound locomotives, if I was going to do something with sound engines, I'd want to do something like this, a shed where you can hear locomotives fire up and then trundle about the layout. That just appeals to me. Staying with 00 was a layout that I can really get behind. This is Shelfie 2. The original was 6 foot long and 18 inches wide, showing that you can have an absolutely stunning layout in a space that's normally associated with, well, a shelf. This one is based around a drift mine loading point in Northumberland. The operation feeds into the exchange sidings adjacent to the East Coast Main Line for transport to Blythe for onward shipping or power station use. The biggest challenge with making a layout like this is trying to ensure that the whole thing isn't just filled with track, and the builder has done this so well. I love the detail that's gone into all of the trees. It really feels like you've stumbled across a railway in the middle of a woodlands, and gives hope to people who are space restricted that you too can build something awesome. Returning to the world of EM gauge, 00's more correct cousin was Navigation Road. Set in the northeast of London during 1971, the home of BR Blue Diesels, this was a beautifully realistic London industrial scene, complete with mainline trains making their way back and forth and plenty of shunting going on as oil tankers were marshalled back and forth ready to be picked up and taken on their onward journey. And it's an absolutely stunningly pretty layout to look at. I particularly like the bridge in the centre of the layout. A little bit of elevation makes a huge difference. In 00 was Dunsfold Road, representing part of the Network South Eastern network somewhere in the south of England during the 1980s. The majority of the traction here were units making their way up and down, and the cool thing about this is it was a lockdown project, and I love how model railways were so useful during that time. Perhaps one of the most visually impressive layouts that I have ever seen was Hassel Harbour Bridge in O-gauge. Set somewhere loosely in the northeast, the layout is dominated by this spectacular bridge in the centre. To achieve something like this in 00 would be pretty impressive, but to do it in O-gauge is nothing short of ridiculous. It has a double-track main line running through it, which was home to a variety of stock, making its way up and down, and operation was intense. There was almost always a train on the bridge when I saw this layout. The most impressive thing was this layout has actually been retired once, and the club had said that it wasn't going to be going out on the circuit anymore, so it's amazing to see it here. And it's not just the bridge itself which is really cool. There was also a working funicular railway that went up and down to the base of the bridge, where there were more models. I mean, this is utterly bonkers, and absolutely fantastic. This is the kind of modelling that I live for, something so different. It starts literally at ground level and rises up to chest height. It's just phenomenal. I absolutely love this. In fact, I'd love to bring some of my stock and take it out on this and actually have a proper go on it, because it's just amazing. And as we have a few seconds left, we have time to squeeze in a bonus layout. This is Blenhan Road in 00, set somewhere in the Midlands between 1960 and 1970. This is home to locomotives of the diesel hydraulic era. It features a 2-road engine shed with scenic portals at each end, and so there is always something moving, with engineering wagons arriving, being shunted and then departing in fresh formations.
And so, just like that in a flash, that is the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed seeing 60 layouts in 60 minutes. And with that, it's now time to pack up the NCMA Modular, take it back to its respective homes, and we'll see you next time for whenever we take this out. So thank you all very much for watching. If you have enjoyed this, how about clicking over there for last year's show, or down there for some other adventures with this, the NCMA Modular. And with that, I'm going home to sleep for a week. Sure. Oh, and pack this up. Packing this up is important. That's the next big thing we need to do. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time. Ta-da!